Step number one, point number one, tool number one, discontinue to carry the shame of the narcissistic parent, because it's quite destructive. It's self-destructive. But the twisted and the really tragic and sad part, and this is the part that really used to piss me off, was that as the child, I did not start that. I didn't start the clock with that one. I didn't get the ball rolling on that one. Point number two, discontinue to be emotionally invested in a dysfunctional family. Right? Easier said than done, but quite effective. Third and final step, continue to operate from a place of love versus a place of fear. Because if you operate from a place of fear, the narcissist can feed off of that. Leave me comments and or questions, right? And also hit that like and or subscription button. Till next time, take care of yourself. Remember, you are worthy of a great life. You are worth it. Okay? Guys, stay tuned for more. Mwah. Bye.
Unmasking the Narcissistic Family Script. A blueprint for deconstructing generational trauma and reclaiming personal power. The scapegoat is not targeted because they are flawed. They are selected because they possess a spirit that repels the narcissist's facade. They are the only one who can see the writing on the wall. This is the engine of narcissistic supply. It begins with the parent's fear of unmasking. This drives the predatory grooming process. The child's sacrifice becomes the fuel.
Adversity leaves a biological imprint. Trauma hardwires neural pathways in the brain. It traps the body in constant fight or flight, and weakens the immune system, increasing disease risk.
Welcome back to Luminousz Star Fables. Today, I will explain the structure of a narcissistic family with several of the components and dynamics that consist of the entire system. This video is a part of my playlist entitled Narcissistic Family Structure, the Legacy Audit and Systems Architect series. I'll be breaking these components and dynamics down by using my signature 3-3-3 framework. 3 points, 3 focus tools, and 3 critical questions that can be used as journaling aids. My goal is to provide a structured pathway through the fog of gaslighting techniques and the heaviness of inherited secrets. Across this 2-volume series, I will bridge the clinical with the somatic using the ongoing episodic journey of a character I created named Alea. We will witness how these patterns manifest in the real world, from the whispers of the old woman at Palms Avenue to the slipping masks of characters like Harper. In Alea's story, these manifestations represent the predatory social engineering used to make a survivor feel deceased to their own vibrant identity. Be sure to check out Alea's story in the playlist series entitled Unmasking the Architecture of Deception Case Files, Alea's Journey. Before we move into the heart of this audit, I invite you to take the 30-second grounding pause. This is to help you remain present while gathering information and to practice the self-regulatory processes your healing deserves. The first point explores the pathology of the narcissistic family structure versus standard dysfunctional families. It is vital to understand that an NFS is a cult-like organization headed by an individual with a fixed personality disorder. While group healing may occur in standard dysfunctional families, in an NFS, the chance is slim to none. This system operates as a dysfunctional family corporation, where the primary objective is the preservation of the parent's false self-image through the constant sourcing of narcissistic supply. Tool number 1. Look at family interactions through a business lens. Ask, is this interaction for my well-being, or is it a transaction to protect the CEO's image? Journaling question, if my family were a corporation, what job description was I hired for? What task am I expected to perform? Am I ready to resign from that role? My second point is the scapegoating cycle. In this system, a specific child is groomed to be the identified patient or sacrificial lamb. Often, You were selected because your spirit or intuition repelled the narcissist's pathology, making you a strategic threat to the family facade. To manage this threat, the system uses systematic isolation and thought reform, tactical destabilization, and mixed messages designed to keep you in a state of cognitive dissonance. Tool number 2, the pattern tracker. Document the mixed messages you received. Seeing them on paper breaks the spell of the thought reform. Second critical question, what specific strength or truth do I possess that the family system tried the hardest to suppress? My third point is the somatic manifestation of this abuse. The body remembers repetitive stress activation. You may experience a somatic alarm, visceral signals like tightness in the chest, migraines, or chronic aches. These are not just stress. They are faithful protectors indicating your safety is being tested. This biological imprint can even involve epigenetic changes, creating molecular memories of ancestral adversity passed down through generations. Tool number 3, the somatic anchor. Identify one physical sensation of safety, a scent, a touch, or a breath to anchor yourself when the alarm triggers. Third critical question, what is my body telling me right now that my mind has been afraid to acknowledge? By witnessing Alea navigate institutional failure and betrayal, you are provided with a forensic roadmap for identifying the shadow engineering in your own life. Her journey encourages your own legacy audit, shifting you from being narcissistic supply to being the lead architect of your own life. This transformation allows you to deliver heart-centered verdict, declaring your peace as a non-negotiable priority. This series is about your safe harbor. Whether you feel deceased to your own needs or are navigating the anxiety of family betrayal, remember, your peace is worth protecting. Be sure to share this video, check the description box for further details and resources.
We're going to systematically deconstruct the dysfunctional family dynamic. We'll be breaking down the complex psychology and biology behind toxic family systems, drawing directly from our source material to understand exactly how they operate and, much more importantly, how you can actually break free from them. All right, let's dive right into this.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're tied to your family, but not actually deeply connected to them? Like the strings are there, but the genuine love kind of isn't? If that resonates with you, you are definitely not alone. Our sources point out that there is a massive difference between a genuine, loving connection and a toxic tie that just leaves you feeling trapped, confused, and completely drained. Today, we're going to validate exactly why that happens. Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1, the narcissistic family cult, 2, grooming the cast of roles, 3, trauma bonds and epigenetics, 4, clearing the FOG, and finally, 5, reclaiming your personal power. Section 1, the narcissistic family cult. To truly understand this dynamic, we literally have to stop looking at these environments as traditional homes and start viewing them as cult-like organizations completely centered around the abuser's needs. At the very foundation of this whole system is something called narcissistic supply. Think of it as fuel. It's the essential emotional energy that the parent extracts from their kids. The narcissistic parent is practically addicted to this emotional validation. They absolutely need this supply from their children just to keep their own terrifying internal realities and insecurities at bay. You see, the abuser is operating from a really deep-seated fear of losing status and control. So what do? They craft this false self-image. Maybe they play the noble martyr or, the flawless spouse to the outside world. And to sustain that illusion, the children are completely stripped of their individuality. They aren't treated as distinct human beings. They're treated as property or little mini-me's whose entire purpose is just to reflect the parent's grandiosity. Which brings us to Section 2, grooming the cast of roles. Because to keep that supply flowing constantly, kids in these systems are non-consensually drafted into specific, lifelong roles from a very, very young age. It's almost like a bizarre theatrical play, cleanly categorized into specific parts. First up, you've got the golden child. They're groomed specifically to reflect the parent's brilliance. But that comes with a really high risk of them becoming the next narcissist themselves. Then there's the scapegoat, who is targeted to carry all the family's projected shame, which results in severe isolation and emotional bleeding. And finally, you have the enabler, or the flying monkey, who completely loses their own identity through obsessive pleasing, defending the parent and actually bullying the target on their behalf. Now, let's zoom in on the scapegoat for a second, because their burden is absolutely crushing. It breaks down into 3 pretty hideous dynamics. First, they face systematic isolation.
They're kept away from support bases so they remain a safe victim for the family to pick on. Second, they endure a projected reality, basically forced to carry all the dark shadows and secrets of the family. And third, they are literally sacrificed for group survival. They're devalued specifically so the rest of the group can feel a sick sense of unity. If you were the scapegoat growing up, this clinically validates why you are always the one to blame. And this orchestration, it bleeds directly into sibling relationships. It's a heartbreaking truth, but sibling rivalry in these families is completely by design. The parent acts like this toxic Wizard of Oz right behind the curtain. They deliberately keep siblings at odds, whispering different stories and secrets to them. Why? Well, because divided siblings can't unite against the abuser, which ensures that constant flow of narcissistic supply never gets interrupted.
All right, moving on to Section 3, Trauma Bonds and Epigenetics. These are basically the invisible psychological and biological chains that lock this entire system in place. We need to make a huge distinction here between a genuine connection and a trauma bond. A deep connection is healthy, it's reciprocal, and it's deeply meaningful. But a trauma bond, that is toxic and entirely survival-based. It's tied together through a really confusing, dizzying mix of abuse followed by intermittent affection. This perfectly explains why a victim feels a desperate, almost magnetic pull toward a parent who flat out refuses to offer them genuine emotional safety. So how are these bonds actually built? Through relentless, calculated control. You've got gaslighting, which literally makes you question your own sanity. You've got character assassination, which isolates you through orchestrated smear campaigns. Projection forces their ugly flaws right onto you. And our sources even use this wild term, telekinesis, metaphorically. It means the abuser purposefully alters your sense of time and reality so you never, ever feel grounded. It keeps you anchored in a state of constant confusion.
Now, here is where the science gets truly mind-blowing. Let's talk about epigenetics. This shows us that the trauma from narcissistic abuse isn't just, a bad memory floating around in your head. It creates an actual physical imprint. Toxic stress causes molecular changes in how your genes are expressed, fundamentally altering DNA reading. This means the trauma is biologically creating inherited trauma that can be passed down through generations. Crazy, right? If you've ever wondered why you feel so incredibly physically and mentally exhausted all the time, this is why. This toxic environment biologically rewires the human body. Kids who are forced to parent the parent suffer from arrested development. Constant buzzing stress alters brain structures and weakens immune systems. You get stuck in a maladaptive fight or flight state, which leads to a massive risk for chronic anxiety, stomach issues, and physical illness. Your body literally keeps the score.
Section 4, Clearing the FOG. Let's dissect the main psychological trap that actually holds victims back from getting free. FOG is an acronym, and it perfectly deconstructs the invisible chains keeping you stuck. F stands for fear. That's the primary motivator keeping you small and terrified of retaliation. O is for obligation, that highly distorted sense of duty making you feel like you have to rescue or counsel your own parent. And G is for guilt, the absolute glue of the trauma bond that makes you feel like a terrible person anytime you even try to stand up for yourself. Recognizing these mechanics is the very first step to dismantling them.
When you're completely wrapped up in that FOG, you end up in what our sources so powerfully call the sunken place. It's like you're existing in two totally different paradigms at once. You are both a spectator watching the chaos unfold and a participant forced to act within a reality defined entirely by the abuser's delusions. It requires heavy dissociation just to survive day to day. You exist, sure, but you aren't truly living.
But there is a way out. Section 5, Reclaiming Your Personal Power. Let's talk about the actionable protocol for breaking this toxic cycle once and for all. All right, here is the concrete, step-by-step recovery strategy. Step 1, plan and strategize. Look, do not jump blindly into no contact. You need a real, safe exit plan. Step 2, practice mindfulness and enforce incredibly strict personal boundaries using emotional discipline. Step 3, denounce the legacy. Actively, consciously refuse to pass this trauma down to the next generation. And step 4, build a support base. You've got to invest in healthy, contrast relationships that actually show you what real connection looks like. And that brings us to the ultimate goal, the whole shebang, lineage reclamation.
Listen to me. You do not owe your abusers your life. You must actively choose to write the epilogue to your ancestral story. By breaking this low-energy cycle and having the courage to walk away from the dysfunction, you are reclaiming your identity. It is the absolute ultimate victory over the toxic script you were handed. I want to wrap up this explainer by leaving you with a really powerful quote straight from our sources. It says, "Your life has purpose. You are not a bad person for reclaiming your personal power." Getting this structured breakdown of the family cult finally gives you the objective truth you need to step right out of the fog. So I'll leave you with this. If you were to finally cut those toxic ties today, what exactly would the first chapter of your reclaimed life look like?
We're unpacking the hidden psychological mechanics of toxic family dynamics. So if you've ever felt just completely drained by a relationship that was supposed to nurture you, well, you're definitely in the right place.
I want you to ask yourself, have you ever questioned your own sanity or have felt guilty just for choosing yourself? Because if you grew up with a narcissistic parent, you might constantly doubt your reality. It's like being trapped in this dark, sunken place. It's a confusing environment where your reality is just chipped away at through subtle manipulation and gaslighting over years and years, until trusting your own gut feels almost impossible.
All right, let's get into Section 1, Signs of Narcissistic Abuse.
You know, the real tragedy of this kind of abuse is that you literally lose your own voice. You might actually find yourself mistrusting people who have proven over and over to be reliable. Or maybe you grapple with feeling completely worthless, or you just detach from your own desires entirely, because the narcissistic parent becomes the absolute center of your universe. You end up endlessly psychoanalyzing them, spinning your wheels trying to figure out how to make them happy, all while your own life gets pushed entirely to the back burner.
Think of it like comparing apples to oranges. A healthy relationship is this vibrant support base. It provides harmony, it lifts you up, and it gives you peace of mind. But on the flip side, you have that draining relationship with a narcissistic parent, right? It just leaves you feeling incredibly heavy, perpetually exhausted, and carrying all the unhealed baggage that they project right onto you.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Dysfunctional Family Playbook.
So here's the thing. The narcissist always needs a target to project their unresolved anger onto. If you've always felt like the black sheep of the family, guess what? You weren't born that way. You were actively groomed to be the sacrificial lamb. As the scapegoat, you're expected to be totally invisible unless it conveniences them, quietly taking the blame just so the narcissist's false reality can stay intact.
But then, right on the other side of this toxic dynamic is the golden child. This child is absolutely showered with narcissistic supply just to keep them compliant. They align perfectly with the parents' delusions, and quite often they're recruited as enablers, or what we call flying monkeys, specifically to help keep the scapegoat in their place.
There's a quote that perfectly captures the true nature of this sunken place. It is within the dark shadows of their dysfunctional family that narcissistic mothers speak curses, deep generational dirty secrets, and sabotage. That is exactly what it is, a hidden environment of emotional manipulation where you're forced to carry their toxic legacy. From the outside, the family probably looks totally normal. But in those shadows, the scapegoat is actively sabotaged and taught to sacrifice themselves for people who, frankly, do not support them.
Let's look at the physical impact in Section 3, the toll of childhood trauma.
This is where it gets crazy, because toxic amounts of stress literally alter your physical development, right down to the way your DNA is read. Early exposure to high adversity messes with your brain structure, your hormonal balance, and even your immune system. Your conscious mind might try to block the memories out, but your body absolutely remembers the trauma.
And over time, living in that constant fight-or-flight mode takes a massive, undeniable toll on you. You become highly susceptible to devastating health issues later down the road. We're talking complex PTSD, severe anxiety, depression, addiction, and even major physical ailments like heart disease. It is the very real physiological cost of carrying someone else's emotional baggage.
You can see how much these symptoms overlap. General trauma and narcissistic abuse both cause intense brain fog, deep shame, and fear. But here is the devastating twist that comes specifically with narcissistic abuse. You become deeply obsessed with pleasing the exact person who is harming you. You're hypervigilant to their shifting moods, completely disconnected from your own self-worth. Which brings us to Section 4, Breaking Free and No Contact.
Reclaiming your power is incredible, but it comes with intense resistance. Think about it. What happens when you pull the plug on their supply by going no contact? A predator doesn't just let go quietly. You've got to be prepared for the fallout the second you decide to walk away.
Because their false self-image has to survive at literally any cost, the family is going to scramble. The toxic shenanigans will rapidly escalate into full-blown attacks. The flying monkeys and enablers will try to guilt-trip you right back into the fold. And shockingly, because they still desperately need a target, they'll often throw the golden child right onto the scapegoating hot seat to replace you. As you break free, you're going to face some seriously tough dilemmas around family gatherings. Expect manufactured drama at summer barbecues and incredibly heavy guilt trips during the holidays. But you have to remember, any function involving the narcissist, even something as solemn as a funeral, gets completely hijacked. It just becomes another platform for them to hunt for their toxic supply.
So how do we fix this? Let's dive into Section 5, Clearing the FOG. First things first, drop the illusion that you can fix them. You have to stop psychoanalyzing the narcissist because they're in a state of rigid resistance and they're not going to change. Second, be super mindful of your emotional triggers. The ones that instantly transports you back to feeling like a helpless 12-year-old. And third, practice strict, unyielding personal boundaries. This is entirely about your own preservation. You have to clear the FOG. That stands for fear, obligation, and guilt. These are the specific emotional chains designed to keep you trapped in that dynamic. Once you clear this fog, you're no longer anxious about pleasing them, you don't feel this heavy obligation to rescue them, and you finally drop the guilt for choosing your own well-being. That is when you step out of the sunken place.
And hey, if guilt still creeps in when you walk away, I want you to consider this. Refusing to pass down this toxicity, refusing to invest in dysfunctional behavior, that is actually the greatest act of love and respect you can possibly show your ancestral lineage. You are literally breaking the cycle.
Let that sink in for a second. You are not a bad person for reclaiming your life and your personal power from the narcissist. You've got to lose the rose-colored glasses, stop idealizing a dysfunctional family, accept reality for what it is, and recognize that choosing your own health over their delusions is 100% justified.
I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to carry with you today. Your purpose on this planet is absolutely not to be someone else's narcissistic supply for all of your existence. You survived the dark shadows, you've seen the truth, so now that you are clearing the fog, what are you going to do with your newly reclaimed freedom?
Imagine growing up inside a rigid, secretive cult. Like your every move is monitored, your thoughts are policed, and you are expected, above all else, to just sacrifice yourself for this unquestioned leader.
Right, the ultimate authority figure.
Exactly. And in this organization, having your own identity is basically a crime. And trying to leave, that is considered the ultimate unforgivable betrayal. Now imagine that cult isn't out in some remote compound somewhere. Imagine that cult is your own family, and the leader is your parent.
Yeah, it is a truly chilling reframing of what we consider to be the fundamental unit of society. I mean, we naturally associate the family with safety, and development.
Of course.
But for a lot of people, the actual architecture of the family is built entirely around coercive control and systemic emotional extraction.
It's intense. But that is the incredibly heavy, yet completely necessary reality we are taking a deep dive into today. We are exploring the profound work from the YouTube channel Luminousz Ztarr Fables. And they focus heavily on family systems trauma, transgenerational trauma, and the really insidious mechanics of narcissistic abuse.
Yeah, the channel does a fantastic job of breaking this
Going
down.
no
They really
contact
do. And
is
we are
not a
going
betrayal.
far beyond just the
Denouncing
surface level
senseless
behaviors
self-sacrifice
here.
and stopping the
Our mission
transmission of
today is to
intergenerational
decode the
abuse
hidden
is the
script
most
of these
profound way to
environments.
honor your
We are going
ancestral
to
lineage
map out
from a
exactly how these family cults function systemically, the actual biological toll this abuse takes right down to your DNA, and the actionable roadmap for victims to finally clear the psychological fog. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
To understand how a family operates like a highly structured cult, we really have to look at the leader's primary motivation first. The entire system revolves around the parent's false self-image, right?
Right, the false self-image. And what's fascinating here is that this isn't just, a big ego or some delusion of grandeur. It is a desperately constructed survival mechanism for them.
Like a shield.
Exactly. The parent is playing a role. Maybe it's the noble martyr, or the flawless spouse, or the untouchable authority figure. And because this image is fundamentally a lie, it requires just constant, unrelenting energy to maintain.
So they're exhausted by it.
Exhausted, but mostly terrified. The parent operates from a state of perpetual underlying terror. Because if that mask slips, they are forced to confront their true, profoundly inadequate self. And to them, that feels like psychological annihilation.
Wow, annihilation.
Yeah.
So to avoid that, they require narcissistic supply.
Precisely.
And for anyone who follows this space, you already know that supply is the emotional validation and the control they extract from the people around them. But what Luminousz and our fables highlights so well is the actual mechanical nature of this extraction.
Mechanical is the perfect word for it.
Right. The children in this system, they aren't viewed as individual human beings with their own agency. They are property. They are these extensions, groomed to be these little mini-me's who exist for literally one reason, and that is to reflect the parent's desired reality back to them.
Yeah, they're essentially forced to act as psychological mirrors. And if the mirror starts reflecting something the parent doesn't want to see, like, say, the child expressing an independent thought, or setting a unique boundary, or even just feeling a normal human emotion like sadness.
Or frustration.
Right, frustration.
Yeah.
The parent perceives that as a direct existential threat. The child isn't just misbehaving in their eyes. The child is threatening the parent's psychological survival.
It makes me think of a highly neurotic director of a stage play. But this director is absolutely terrified the audience is going to realize the beautiful set behind them is just made of cheap cardboard.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. So to keep the illusion alive, they force the actors to perform their lines perfectly, practically at gunpoint. Like every single ad-lib by an actor is a mortal threat to the entire production.
It perfectly captures the desperation of it all. A director like that, they cannot afford improvisation. To prevent any ad-libbing, they have to lock the actors into lifelong, unchangeable roles. Right. That is literally the only way to guarantee the family system remains stable and that the narcissistic supply keeps flowing uninterrupted.
And anyone familiar with narcissistic family dynamics knows the cast of characters, right? You've got the golden child, the enabler, the scapegoat. But looking at the actual mechanics of these roles reveals something deeply tragic. Let's take the golden child first.
Okay.
They are treated like a little god, you know, showered with privileges and groomed to reflect the parent's brilliance. But underneath the pedestal, they are completely forbidden from being a real person.
Exactly. They are rewarded exclusively for their compliance in upholding the false self-image. And the tragedy of the golden child is that they undergo a kind of psychological amputation.
Psychological amputation. That is a heavy phrase.
But it's true. They have to cut off their authentic self to fit into this golden mold. And because of this, they are at an incredibly high risk of becoming the next generation's narcissist, or what the sources call a narcissistic pariah.
Which means what exactly?
It means they walk through life treating others terribly because they've been fundamentally programmed to believe their worth is tied to superiority and dominance. They don't know how to connect genuinely.
Right, because they were never allowed to. And then you have the enabler, or the flying monkey. They basically function as the family's PR and security team.
Yes, exactly.
They defend the parent, they clean up the emotional messes, and they bully anyone who steps out of line. They completely abandon their own identity in this obsessive quest to co-sign the family's toxicity. But, you know, it makes me wonder, though. Well, if you have 3 kids, does a parent just look at them and say, okay, you're the smartest, so you're the golden child, and you're the most compliant, so you're the enabler? Like, how much of this casting is actually based on who the kid really is?
That is such an important question. And the reality is deeply unsettling. The casting process has almost nothing to do with the child's true personality or their innate talents.
Wait, really? Nothing at all?
Very little. These roles are pre-scripted systemic slots. Children are often groomed for these specific positions right from the womb. The parent is just blindly preserving the structure of the system, so the child's actual authentic identity is completely overwritten by whatever function the parent needs filled at that exact moment to keep the stage play running.
Wow. Overwritten. That is, man, that brings us to the role everyone always has the most questions about, the scapegoat.
Yes, the scapegoat.
Anyone who has survived this dynamic knows the scapegoat is the sacrificial lamb. They're the one forced to carry all of the parents' projected shame, the unresolved anger, and the family's deep, dark secrets. But what I want to dig into is the selection criteria. Why is this specific child targeted to carry that massive burden?
Well, it's interesting because the scapegoat is rarely chosen because they are weak. In fact, it's often the exact opposite.
Really? I think people assume it's the most vulnerable kid.
It's a common misconception. But the scapegoat is typically the child who intuitively sees the writing on the wall. They possess a spirit or an inherent emotional intelligence or an energy that naturally repels the narcissist's toxicity.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so in the eyes of the parent, this child is a massive threat. They are the actor on stage most likely to turn to the audience and point out that the set is made of cardboard.
Ah, so the parent targets them as a threat neutralizer.
Exactly. The parent isolates this child
Yeah.
and subjects them to systemic abuse, calculating that the enablers and the golden child won't intervene. The group's survival, the cult's survival, depends on sacrificing this one individual to maintain the equilibrium of the false self-image.
So they just dump everything on them.
Right. The parent projects all their own internal garbage onto this child, essentially using them as an emotional landfill, keeping the rest of the family artificially clean.
And to make sure the scapegoat stays isolated, the parent deploys sibling sabotage. This is where the dysfunction becomes highly, highly strategic.
Oh, absolutely.
The narcissistic parent deliberately pits the siblings against each other. They manufacture chaos by whispering different toxic secrets to each child, like they'll tell the golden child something awful and completely fabricated about the scapegoat, and vice versa. It creates this constant, thick, unexplained tension in the air whenever the family is together.
Because if we connect this to the bigger picture, manufacturing chaos is a primary mechanism of control. The parent needs to remain the central, powerful figure. So if the siblings are busy suspecting each other and resenting each other,
and fighting for the parent's conditional approval,
exactly, then they will never look closely at the parent's actual behavior.
it's literally a classic divide and conquer military strategy applied to the family dinner table.
That's exactly what it is.
It's a general intentionally moving troops around to ensure the infantry deeply resents the cavalry. Because if those siblings ever sat down, compared notes, and formed a united alliance, the parent's false self-image would instantly collapse. The illusion just can't survive collective scrutiny.
The tension is entirely the point. And this constant psychological warfare, it traps the victim in what is vividly described in the material as the sunken place.
A sunken place.
Yeah, it is this deep, dark shadow within the family structure where the victim is kept invisible, silenced, and expected to just endlessly absorb the toxicity.
And the psychological chains keeping them locked in that sunken place are known as the FOG.
Right, FOG, fear, obligation, and guilt.
Now, we all know what those words mean normally, but in the context of a narcissistic family cult, they take on a much darker systemic function. Like, fear isn't just being afraid of a raised voice, it's the deeply ingrained terror of retaliation. The fear of the smear campaign the parent will launch to destroy your reputation if you speak the truth.
Yes, and obligation, similarly, is totally twisted. The parent instills a pathological sense of duty. The child is groomed from infancy to believe they must be the parent's rescuer or their counselor, carrying all the emotional burdens of the adult.
Which completely inverts the natural parent-child dynamic.
Completely. The child is parenting the parent.
But guilt is the one that really anchors the victim. Guilt is the glue of the trauma bond. And what we really need to focus on is how that guilt actually operates mechanically. The parent manipulates the child into feeling like a fundamentally bad person anytime they try to reclaim their own personal power or set a basic boundary.
And to understand how powerful that guilt is, we really have to look at the underlying physiological mechanics. Because this isn't just feeling bad about missing a family dinner.
Right.
The FOG creates an environment of intermittent reinforcement. It's these unpredictable cycles of intense abuse followed by crumbs of affection. And this cycle totally hijacks the brain's reward center.
Hijacks it how?
Well, the high spikes of cortisol from the fear,
Right.
and then the sudden drops of dopamine when the parent shows a fleeting moment of approval that creates a literal biochemical addiction in the brain.
Wow.
The victim becomes trauma bonded to the abuser in the exact same way a person becomes addicted to a substance.
So the parent constructs this alternate reality where a basic human instinct like self-preservation is framed as the ultimate betrayal, and the child's internal compass is just systematically broken through gaslighting. They genuinely believe that protecting themselves is a malicious, selfish act against the family.
The gaslighting is so pervasive that the child learns to doubt their own memory. They doubt their own perception of reality and ultimately their own sanity. When you are constantly told that your reaction to abuse is the actual problem, the cognitive dissonance becomes physically exhausting.
And here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit terrifying. The trauma of living in that sunken place, breathing in that FOG for years and years, it doesn't just hurt a person's feelings or give them a complex, it physically alters their biology.
This is a crucial point. We are moving directly from the psychological into the physiological now.
Right.
The constant verbal and emotional abuse, the chronic state of hypervigilance, it leads to what is termed arrested development. A child's emotional and cognitive growth is quite literally stunted.
Because they're just in survival mode.
Exactly. When a child's brain is flooded with stress hormones, all of their cognitive resources are diverted away from developing a healthy sense of self, or learning emotional regulation, or exploring the world. Every single ounce of energy is spent simply trying to survive the immediate threat and manage the parent's volatile moods.
But the material shows it goes much deeper than just brain development. It goes right down to the DNA. We need to talk about the epigenetic imprint.
Oh, the epigenetics part is fascinating.
It really is. When a child experiences this level of high adversity and toxic stress, it fundamentally affects their immune system, their hormonal regulation, and even the expression of their genes.
Yes. This brings us into the science of epigenetics, and specifically a process called DNA methylation.
Break that down for us. What is DNA methylation?
Okay, so when a body is under chronic traumatic stress, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, is constantly engaged. The body is just flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. And over time, this toxic chemical environment actually attaches what we call methyl groups to your genes.
Wait, does that mean it actually changes your DNA sequence? Like structurally?
No, not the sequence itself. That underlying sequence stays the same. But it changes how those genes are expressed.
Yeah.
These methyl groups act like volume knobs on your genome. They turn down the expression of genes responsible for immune health and stress regulation, and they turn up the genes associated with inflammation and anxiety.
It essentially leaves molecular memories of trauma on the genome, meaning the trauma your narcissistic grandparent experienced, or the trauma they caused, can literally be passed down to you molecularly. You inherit the physical echo of the abuse before you've even taken your first breath.
It's staggering to think about. And because of this epigenetic change, the victim's fight-or-flight response becomes severely maladaptive. It just gets stuck in the on position.
Yeah.
The nervous system loses its ability to return to a baseline of safety. So the body is acting as if the threat is always present, even when the person is just sitting alone in a quiet room.
Which is why it's so exhausting.
Exactly. And in adulthood, this physiological dysregulation manifests as chronic anxiety, severe depression, complex PTSD, a high susceptibility to addiction, and even severe physical conditions like autoimmune disorders and heart disease. The body is meticulously keeping the score of the narcissistic abuse.
Okay, wait. I have to stop here. Because if I'm listening to this right now and I've survived a narcissistic family, I'm probably thinking, is my DNA permanently broken? Like, if the trauma literally alters my genetic expression and leaves these molecular memory tags on my genome, am I just permanently doomed by my own biology to suffer the physical and mental consequences forever?
I am so glad you paused here, because this raises an incredibly important question, and it is precisely where the science transitions from terrifying to profoundly hopeful.
Oh, thank goodness.
Epigenetic tags are not written in permanent ink. The material is incredibly clear on this. Traces of genetic trauma can be tweaked and reversed.
Okay, that is a huge relief. So it's not a life sentence.
It is absolutely not a life sentence. The beautiful thing about neuroplasticity and epigenetics is that just as toxic stress can attach those methyl groups, profound healing can remove them.
Really? Just through healing?
Yes. Positive experiences, rigorous mindfulness practices, targeted therapy, and fundamentally breaking the cycle of abuse. All of these create new, healthy chemical environments in the body. And over time, you can literally rewrite the expression of your DNA. The toxic script was written for you without your consent, but you have the inherent biological capacity to rewrite it.
The body remembers, but the script can be rewritten. I love that. So knowing that recovery isn't just psychologically possible, but biologically possible, how do we actually rewrite that script? How does a victim break the cycle and escape the family cult? Luminousz Ztarr fables point strongly toward the process of reclamation and the highly strategic implementation of no contact.
Yeah, going no contact is often the most vital, life-saving step. But there is a really crucial warning attached to it in the material. Do not just impulsively jump into it. It is not merely blocking a phone number in a fit of rage or frustration.
Right, because if you just block them without a plan, you are completely unprepared for the systemic backlash that is definitely coming. Escaping requires intense planning, quiet strategizing, and crucially, building a solid, impenetrable support base outside the family structure before you make your move.
Exactly. When you go no contact, the abuser's false self-image is severely threatened. They are losing their primary source of narcissistic supply. So the cult will mobilize. You have to anticipate intense waves of survivor's guilt washing over you, compounded by this desperate nostalgia for a healthy, loving family that never actually existed.
That nostalgia is so dangerous.
It really is. And you must recognize that the flying monkeys, the enablers, they will come out of the woodwork. They will pressure you. They'll attempt to manipulate your guilt. And they'll use literally every tactic imaginable to drag you back into the sunken place. And usually it's simply to restore the family's toxic equilibrium and get the pressure off themselves.
So what are the practical tools to fight that massive gravitational pull back into the cult? The materials highlight practicing deep mindfulness, which grounds your nervous system in reality rather than the abuser's gaslighting. You have to practice severe emotional discipline and assertion. And a huge component is building what they call contrast relationships.
Contrast relationships are absolutely essential for cognitive rewiring. If your only baseline for love and connection is transactional, conditional, and abusive, your brain thinks that is normal.
Right, you don't know any better.
Exactly. So you need healthy friendships, healthy partnerships, or support groups to directly compare against that toxic family dynamic.
It basically provides a massive reality check.
It proves to your nervous system that relationships can exist without fear, without crushing obligation, and without manufactured guilt. It creates an entirely new baseline for safety.
It's like discovering you've been drinking from a poison well your entire life. Everyone around you in the family is sick, they look sick, they act sick, but they keep telling you the water's perfectly fine and you're crazy for thinking it tastes bad.
That's a great way to put it.
Building contrast relationships is finally walking away and taking a sip of pure, clean water for the very first time. And suddenly, with that clarity, you realize, oh my God, I am the very first person in my ancestral line brave enough to finally stop drinking the poison.
And that reframing of the narrative is the ultimate act of psychological reclamation. Victims of this type of abuse are deeply programmed to feel that walking away, going no contact, is a heinous betrayal of their family.
But it's not.
No, but walking away requires a radical perspective shift. Denouncing the dysfunctional legacy is not a betrayal. It is, in fact, the most loving, profound way to respect and honor your ancestral lineage. You are actively refusing to pass the sickness forward to the next generation. You are the one doing the incredibly painful work of saving the family tree by pruning the diseased branch.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've journeyed deep into the dark, mechanical architecture of the narcissistic family cult. We've seen how the terror of exposing the false self-image demands an unending, exhausting supply of your energy, forcing you into pre-written, rigid roles just to keep the stage play going. We've uncovered the very real biological epigenetic toll of living in that FOG trapped in the sunken place where your DNA is literally altered by the stress. But more importantly, we've mapped out the concrete strategy to clear that fog, to plan your exit, to build contrast relationships, to actively rewrite your genetic expression, and to reclaim your autonomy. Because you need to hear this loud and clear. Your life has profound purpose. You are an individual. You are not a mistake. You are not property. And you are absolutely not just someone else's narcissistic supply.
And if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, it leaves us with a truly fascinating, almost evolutionary implication to ponder. We now know definitively that trauma changes our epigenetic expression, but that conscious, courageous healing can actually correct it. What then happens to the genetic legacy of the narcissist who never faces their truth? The parent who remains desperately trapped in their false self-image, extracting supply until the very end.
Oh, that is an interesting thought.
As the cycle breakers step away, doing the hard work to actively heal, regulate their nervous systems, and strengthen their own DNA expressions, the unexamined toxic lineage may eventually program its own biological obsolescence. By refusing to heal and insisting on the illusion, the narcissistic system effectively writes itself out of the future, leaving only the brave, the healed, and the cycle breakers to carry humanity's evolution forward.